Welcome to Upper Pylon 2. Our mission is to provide you with an in-depth review of every episode of DS9 in the order they were broadcast. Tonight's episode is Things Past, and this is Chris in South Carolina.
And this is Blair from Ontario, Canada.
This is Matt in Buffalo.
And this is Matt from Arizona, and you are cleared for docking. I'm really excited to talk about this episode this week, so without further ado, let's get into Things Past. Our synopsis: Cisco, Dax, Garrick, and Odo are trapped in the past in some neural energy excessiveness that causes them to be aboard Deep Space Nine when it was known as Terok Nor. This is the 8th episode of Season 5. It first aired on November 18th, 1996, written by Michael Taylor, and it was directed by LeVar Burton. Guest stars include Kurtwood Smith as Thrax, Mark Alimo as Dukat, Victor Bevine as Balar, and unknown performer as Timur Landy. So, Chris, whenever you're ready, take us into Things Past.
Absolutely, man. I'd love to. So, Dax, Cisco, Odo, and Garrick are on the way back from a Bajoran historical conference. Garrick is appalled that the Bajorans did not appreciate his defense of their military occupation. All eyes turn to Odo as they mention that he has a huge fan club. This will be our very first clip.
Everyone went out of their way to dismiss virtually everything I had to say.
I thought the Bajorans bent over backwards to be polite to you, Garrick.
Giving me a name tag that read Elam Garrick, former Cardassian oppressor, was hardly polite.
And what did you want it to say? Former spy?
What I would have liked was less posturing and more debate. It's clear to me now that the Bajorans aren't really interested in discovering historical truth as much as they are in promoting the myths and legends of the glorious resistance.
Well, Odo wasn't a member of the resistance, and he managed to attract a fair amount of attention.
Yes, it seems you have quite a fan club on Bajor. I half expected you to be signing autographs at the end.
Don't let him get to you, Odo. You should be proud of what you did during the occupation.
I've nothing to be proud of.
Go
Bring
ahead.
order to a chaotic situation, that's all. You need to give yourself more credit, Constable. Keeping order during the occupation would be a tough job for anyone.
I can definitely talk
You
some
did it
stuff
by
here.
earning the trust of both sides.
What was it the moderator said? That you may have worked for the Cardassians, but your only master was justice.
And a legend is born.
Sorry. So I have some thoughts coming out of that. First off, in what capacity was Garrick attending this conference? Did he want former spy? Because what was he just like? He had no official role in that. He was always some other position. It's weird that he's there in any which way. But whatever, it's funny.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing too. Like, on what basis did he get invited? I guess he's a quote unquote somewhat friendly Cardassian. By the way, I just have like this image of my head of Garrick wearing a name tag that actually says plain simple Garrick.
Now, was this the first episode we've seen him of the season, or am I missing something?
Fresh out of jail.
That's exactly. Maybe that was his penance. He had to go down to Bajor and deal with that for if he wanted to get out early.
So this is community service and probation sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
This is Garrick's always an interesting character. It is interesting the way they went with him this week. Like, I get that he'll do stuff to just kind of like needle people and get them on edge and just give them a hard time intentionally, just as his role. But he was a little surprisingly overtly racist and supporting of the occupation this week. I thought it was like a little over, maybe just enough to kind of make him like uncertain where he would be in the flashback component of this.
I mean, if we really think about, he was never anti-occupation before. He just happened to be exiled at the time. But we go back to that one. Was it season 2 episode where they about the Cardassian war orphans being left behind on Bajor? He was not exactly speaking down about the occupation back then either. He just doesn't like Dukat.
Right. It's just his overall demeanor just kind of seemed like he was definitely taking a position in this, and where oftentimes he is not going to take a position necessarily. It's more so that he is looking out for himself oftentimes. And this is where it's surprising that you're seeing that side of him come out a little bit.
But he's never, to me, he's never not been sort of patriotic.
Right. But again, it's not out of character, because it could easily also be explained of he's in a room full of Bajorans, and Garrick, that we know, is going to take that as a chance to just annoy people and just be gleeful about it. So it kind of works very much in that capacity. But if you're taking him at true genuineness, it didn't quite work for me. But then again, like I said, I think part of that's also showing the cards of what's coming up in this episode. And you maybe want to have a little uncertainty where his allegiances are going to be. Like, may he, if this was a true time travel episode, is he going to take this as an opportunity to jump back to his people and like give up our heroes? Like, so I think they're playing that up a little bit here by really turning on the Cardassian.
Probably. I also think they might be playing it up too if they're going to talk about the story and whether or not it's a time travel thing. We've already seen that Garrick is, he'll help people if it's convenient for him, but he's always out mainly for himself. So it makes you, before you realize that this is not quote unquote a time travel thing, you might be wondering whether or not he's going to do something that, you're thinking in the back of your head, he'll try to help out Cisco and Odo and Dax if he can, but he's ultimately looking out for number one, which is himself.
And before we really roll into the show, because I think it's right off the top, we can start the discussion of one thing I never quite bought into 100%. And it is one of the things that the writers wanted to address in this episode is I never truly got that the Bajorans would happily accept Odo after the occupation. I always thought that they would see him as still, yeah, he's not a Cardassian, but he still definitely worked with them. And to have him get this reverence, and we see that's not truly earned necessarily, but the fact that they hold that never quite felt too real. And I know the writers were feeling that as well. And that's the whole point of this episode, is to bring into question, I guess, should they have held this character to that level of respect?
Yeah.
Should this legend have become what it becomes? I fully agree, but I think that's some of the power of this episode. Should the legend have become as legendary as it became?
And like many legends, I mean, Zeph from Cochrane is another legend, and usually legends are built up to things that never were quite true or exaggerated or that gets lost in translation over time. Right, Chris?
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. But go on, Blair. Sorry.
Some could even argue, we use the word legend, but, and I know it's, people could argue against this word, but collaborator could be thrown in there as well.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. I think we walk that line this week.
I think, though, not at the beginning. Collaborator is not what we would say at the beginning. At the beginning, all the way up until Odo admits his own fault, he is hero. He is special. And right. I think that you're supposed to read him as such.
Right. And that's where I bump up against the reality of this, in that I don't think the Bajorans, yes, the thematic element is true, and we're given the story as that. But if we take it even a step further back, just to kind of the reality of the situation, I don't think the Bajorans would have ever been in a position to see him as a legend or a hero or whatever. I think they would have always looked at him as a collaborator.
I think in the moment, maybe, but I think that there is some place for him as what he becomes to them.
Plus, I mean, we already saw way back in season 2 with Necessary Evil that he already made himself pretty good with Kira when she was in the Resistance. So I wouldn't be surprised if I wish they would have addressed this, you're right, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe there was some disagreement about what to do with Odo as soon as the occupation was over, and because he won the favor of some people like Kira who ended up being higher-ranking members, maybe that secured his position.
Yeah, well, that must be the headcanon. Go on. Yeah, go on, Chris.
I kind of like this as that, if that makes sense. I like this episode as that this is what we thought he was, but he's not, if that makes sense. So like, I love it as a kind of full view of what a hero actually is.
Right.
It's what every Hercules movie tries to be, but never is.
And Matt, no, I totally hear what you're saying, and yeah, I wish they had walked that line a little finer, but I will accept that that premise because I like where they end up going in this episode. I'm just gonna be honest with you. I think this episode's forgotten and underrated.
Right.
Really like this one.
And just to your point there, what you said is enough headcanon for me, because I could easily see a world where once the occupation's over, they're going through, sweeping through, and getting rid of the collaborators. The episodes that we saw in Battlestar Galactica, where it's the cleansing kind of stuff. And that Odo, I think, easily could have been wrapped up in that because he is capturing people who are terrorists or the freedom fighters or however you want to say it. He was putting the people trying to fight for the liberation to death. So I would imagine there'd be a lot of Bajorans that would see him as a collaborator. And then the headcanon Matt points out is enough for me that he must have had a benefactor somewhere, some high person enough, maybe Kira, maybe somebody else, that kept him from getting rolled up into that.
Indeed. Well, let's roll on with our story and see if we can get a little further and figure out what Odo is in this episode particularly. So we shift back to DS9, and the runabout is on autopilot with 4 very weak life signs aboard. Worf and Julian beam over and find the crew who attend the conference all asleep at the wheel. They apparently have a glut of energy in their cerebral cortex, but Julian has no idea why. Shift over to Terragnor. Sisko wakes up in Bajoran rags as we break to opening credits. It's kind of strange.
Yeah,
Always cool. Always
I
cool
love
to go back
seeing
to Terragnor.
You read my mind. I love the set design, the way they alter the sets and the lighting for when we go back to Terragnor.
Every time it works. Just turn off half the lights on the set.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's awesome.
I was about to say, it's always so minuscule. It's like cutting off the lights and you get a little bit of a
turn down the lights, put up some gates, and pump in some smoke because it's a little foggy.
Pump in some smoke, indeed. That's fantastic.
But it looks good. It's not like in TNG where they do something a little different, or it's another ship that you really know is the Enterprise. Like this sells it as wow, like. You feel like you're in that place, that it doesn't seem like, as you guys said, turn down the lights and pump in smoke. I think they really do justice to altering the set to make you really feel that you're in this time.
Plus,
it almost feels bleak and desperate.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I love the reminder every now and then that we're 5 seasons into the show, and like many of the crew, we're getting used to being on this Cardassian space station. I like how the series periodically reminds us, hey, this home that you love and have gotten to know so well, this used to be kind of like a concentration camp.
Yeah, the upper deck of the promenades, not just for looking out the windows. That's where they would publicly execute people.
Oh,
those bridges aren't just for Keiko jumping off of.
Or the guards who staring down at them too, with rifles in hand, keeping an eye on them. The one point I also wanted to make, and I know we've talked about this in other type of episodes about what characters they select for a particular episode, and I think this week they did it justice. Obviously Odo, the main person, we understand why he's there. Sisko, the commanding officer, I think he's in the right spot. Garrick, fantastic. I really like having him in there, and Dax for various reasons. And I'm glad they kept Kira completely out of this episode until the end, or they didn't have Julian instead of Sisko or something, right? I really thought they got the involved characters. Yeah. And I forget which episode it was there where we said, the one where Apocalypse Rising, like why the heck didn't they pick Dax to go on that mission, right? This makes sense. I'm happy with who they selected.
I don't think it's a big deal ultimately in the episode, but I didn't necessarily need the Dax story here because we see the creepy raping Dukat before and after this. So I'm not sure I necessarily needed her story in there, but it probably needed a little bit more filler content for.
I would
other
think that there are
ones.
very few people that you would believably think could blow a hole in Terragnor at any point in time besides Dex.
Well, yeah,
So,
that's a cool, fun moment.
She
You know what? I hate to say it too, but I almost wish she would have said, "Don't you know a jailbreak when you see one?" Because it was total Star Trek V moment.
Yeah, and I feel like only Dax could pull that off. Like maybe I don't know anybody else that could pull that off with the panache that she could. So I like her here. I think that she's right.
Plus, I have something to say about her scene with Ducat later once we get into it. It's something that interested me.
Plus, I also think that she and Odo have a relationship that has been built to this point, 5 seasons in, to such an extent that this is warranted. Where you don't want to use Kira here because Kira is going to be the heavy for the very end to kind of bring the chills and the moment that you need for this episode. So I feel like Dax is the good in between to be the person that Odo loves but doesn't love, if that makes sense.
Plus, Kira being back in this sort of time, I don't know if she would have been able to adapt fully because this is very emotional for her. It would be very emotional for her being back in the occupation where like Dax can keep her cool in this situation.
Right. I think Dax is the right one for this particular story. But let's move on with the story so that we can kind of see where this goes. I've got a lot of text here before we get to our next clip, so I'm just going to kind of run through a lot of it before I stop for us to talk again. Because this story is pretty deep and intense. So I just want to rock through it. Bajoran wakes our crew as he runs them down for taking chemicals, quote unquote. He tells them to get up. We don't need another cleansing today, whatever cleansing is. They follow orders and get moving. All are a little bit taken aback. They don't know where they are yet. Turns out that our crew has hit a class 2 plasma storm, but who knows if that even matters. The jury is out as we start up our B story with Julian and Worf trying to figure out where our characters actually are. So back with our main characters, Dax, Odo, Sisko, and Garrick are in the dream world. They look like Bajorans to the others, but they look like themselves to each other. So they discuss their plight, and they have differences of opinion. Why are they here? What are they doing? Garrick thinks that they should go to the authorities and tell them, we don't belong here. The rest of them think that's stupid. Rightfully so. Odo seems overly worried and stressed because he knows exactly where and when they are. Then they move about. Odo sees a strange figure, but no one else seems to have seen him. So he rejoins the crew, and they discuss Odo's predecessor and realize they may have gone back about 9 years. The scene ends with Jadzia being taken away and Garrett getting punched directly in the face for being cute and charming, or at least trying to. Meanwhile, Julian and Worf, well, they just don't know. And thank God this is the last scene we have like that for a while. Back to Sisko and Odo, who are trying to figure out why Jadzia was selected, quote unquote. Garrick thinks they need to figure out who they are. So Garrick has stolen a high-level security code from the guy who punched him in the face, aka his plastic surgeon. This gives him security access, so they get their identities in the next scene. But Odo seems to already know his identity. Sisko and Garrick are suspicious, but Quark interrupts to offer them work. He belittles them as they move toward his bar. Odo muses about how much trouble it would cause in the timeline if Quark experienced a tragic accident and died. Sisko says he's not sure, but he'd like to try the little experiment. Everybody wants to kill Quark. Do we want to talk at this point?
Yeah, we got to talk about the Quark stuff a little bit, right?
This is a bleak episode, rightfully
so.
so.
Man, so bleak.
So it's nice that we have this one little comedic moment, and you can imagine that Quark was like this way to real Bajorans anyway.
Indeed,
right?
Yeah.
How does this not like impact how all these people view him? Well, not Garrick. Garrick, it's probably an endearing quality to Garrick, but how is that not going to change how Bashir, or not Bashir? I'm sorry, Sisko looks at Quark in the future, knowing that he was there during this time and guessing what he probably was up to is different than being on the receiving end of it.
Yeah.
Granted, through some technobabble, blah, 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 but there's no way Cisco's going to look at him the same way.
So that's funny. My wife and I recently started watching Voyager together. My wife's never watched Voyager, and she's like, "Oh, I love this. It's so techno-babbly. It reminds me of Star Trek." And I'm like, "No, good Star Trek has techno-babble at the right places. Like Voyager doesn't have it at the right
Voyager's
places."
too techno-babbly.
Exactly. And this is techno-babble in all the right places. Like,
And they don't
this
focus on
episode
it.
would be what I would show people if I was like, "Hey, you want techno-babble in the right places? This is the episode."
I mean, I don't know how you feel, Matt. I know you're going to make a point, but for me, I'm glad that we only focus on the Julian Worf thing like twice. They give us a plausible enough reason for why this is going on, and they know that our focus should be with the characters in the past.
Oh, it's Matt's Big Trouble in Little China gambit. It's the it is.
No,
it
no.
has to, dude, come on.
No.
You're saying it's
This
not?
is no, because that's like the Big Trouble in Little China stuff is clever. This is, oh yeah, by the way, the changelings were telepaths this whole time. Zoinks. No, they weren't. They never were. Guys, the story is good. I like that we explored it. The MacGuffin they came up with it is horrendous. It's awful.
I don't know about that.
And it's bad technical babble. It is, but it's not.
I disagree.
It doesn't destroy the episode, but it's like, oh, geez, really? I could have sworn we were just going to go with those crazy prophets doing their thing again.
Yeah, but
that would have been better. 2 weeks in a row.
That would have been trite. That would have been what they've been doing. I think that what they do is really, really good. I think that this being all in Odo's mind and he's more changeling than he thought he was is actually pretty clever. I think that you're short selling them to say that this is just easy. This wasn't easy.
I want to, they also have to offer an explanation of why are we going into Odo's memories through 3 other people on that runabout. Why aren't we going back to the Borg attack at Saratoga? Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that?
Right, but that's easy mode. Oh, why are they in his mind? Okay. He has a characteristic that we've never established before, that they have telepathic abilities. That's easy mode. That's
they did establish this.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did in the Great Link episode.
Yeah,
this is the Great Link thing.
Because they're in direct cell-to-cell contact. Every single person. No, bleep, bleep, bleep. But no, that's what it is. They are in each other. They are each other. That's what that is.
In his mind. They implanted in his mind. Dude, at the beginning of this season, they implanted in his mind the idea that it could be this thing when it wasn't this thing. So, of course, they have this mind warp ability.
Because they physically share one mind. It's one touching thing.
Right. Can I just point out that how fun it is to have Chris play my role this week?
Why don't they, mind meld and take over people's minds instead of the whole, replacing them kind of a thing?
Well,
Chris, you're wrong. Episode's 1 star. Let's move on.
No, they can't. They can't. They
because they can't because they're not
the
telepaths.
only place that they can do this is in the Great Link. But because they made Odo into
direct physical contact.
Wait a minute.
Beep, bleep.
Bleep. You know what, guys? Let me bring it back to Earth with something that I think we can all agree on. Whether or not we agree on how we get there, I think we can all agree on that the fact that the fact that they do not focus, that's not the focus of the story. It's not about the anomaly of the week. That's a good thing. Like it's an offhand mention, and we can actually focus on what is important here, which is the drama.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, this is totally cutting ahead. Because it's on the technical babble thing. They give you a bad technical babble thing, in my opinion alone. But then they wash it out with potentially the best scene of the episode, where Kira confronts him at the end. We'll get into that, but
absolutely the best
right,
part.
And that solves any issue other in the episode. So let's get back on track.
Sells down the river. I believe that this is Mark Twain's Pudd'nhead Wilson. This episode is Mark Twain's Pudd'nhead Wilson. It's everything that he wanted to say in life in a terrible manuscript. So part of me agrees with you, Smonsky, that this is not that great, but it's also bone-chillingly awesome, if that makes sense. Like it's terrible, but also at the end of it, when I watch that last scene, I cry and my bones shake, and everything about this episode is great at that point. So let's get there. Let's get there in all the terribleness that it is. I don't even remember where I left off.
Have we gotten to the scene with Dax and Ducat yet? Because I want to talk about that real quick.
Yeah.
You left off of all the Quark things.
Yeah, the Quark stuff.
Odo muses about how much trouble it would cause in the timeline if Quark experienced a great tragic accident. Sisko says he's not sure, but he'd like to try a little experiment. Meanwhile, Jadzia is brought before Ducat. She uses the name Lita. Ducat has her pour Kanar for two. As they drink together, he tells her he just needs companionship. A Bajoran girl who will be his friend. But just to share his inner thoughts. Not be a girlfriend. They toast to the beginning of Dax's education. What an asshole. Meanwhile, Garak and Sisko and Odo are cleaning up Quarks. And Garak admits that this is ridiculous. And he makes some ignorant racial slurs about Bajorans and how they're the lower class who should be servile. And they're suited for dirty work like this. Sisko tells him he'll make sure to let Kara know. And Garak admits that he's a dumbass. Meanwhile, Odo sees his strange figure again. This time walking with two pals. It gives him pause. He shudders and he leans over the bar. Sisko checks on him and then questions him about how he knew. He admits that these three men were accused of trying to kill Ducat. Sisko says many men tried to do this. Why would these men be special? Why would you remember them? And Odo tells him that these three were innocent, but were made an example of by being murdered openly on the promenade. And then we switch to Quark, who's visited by a Cardassian, Lavara. And apparently this guy's been being watched by the Obsidian Order for some time. He was trying to offload some contraband, but it was useless to Quark, who knows the Cardassians won't buy it. And the Bajorans can't really afford it. So our crew is watching on as Quark discusses this. And then they begin discussing their own situation. Garak is sure that they're 7 years in the past, but Odo was on the station at that time. So where is Odo in this dream? Our crew gets some soup, and they try to figure out the resistance, and they use a little secret technology to try to get the resistance involved. And Garak uses it as an opportunity to lay some judgment on the swaggering, pompous ass that is Ducat. Sisko says, maybe he's a pompous ass, but he's no fool. Meanwhile, Odo sees the figures again, and he shudders. Sisko asks if he's all right, but the resistance leader swoops in, and they ask him for transport for the ship. And they tell him they aren't who they seem to be. He lays into them pretty heavily before an explosion nearly kills Dax and Ducat. Sisko runs over. Odo and Garak try to get him to run away, but alas, they're all caught and put in jail. And our crew is being interrogated by Thrax, who shouldn't actually be here if this is 7 years in the past. And this will be our next clip.
Timur, Isham, Giller. You came aboard the station 2 days ago from the Rakanta province. Yesterday, you paid a visit to the chemist shop and then fell asleep on the promenade.
Sorry for talking so much. I figure you guys want to get through this.
After you were paid,
No,
This
you're
is the end of
doing
the
good.
episode.
I have a couple things I want to say after this clip is done.
Cool. So I'll let you start right after, and then we'll just go until we go, and then I'll finish to the.
We're doing fine.
There were witnesses.
We'll be fine. Pretty much all my points are just can be from here on out are summed up in like final thoughts and ratings kind of thing.
I agree. Yeah, no, this episode is all these last three clips. All the three clips are fucking powerful. I can't.
Like I said, I think this people forget about this one. This is one of those, to use Matt's term, but this is one of those surprising ones.
Yeah, sneaky good. It won't get 5-star from me. I'll talk about why, but it's not quite perfect, but it's good.
I think it's
Yeah, but you would agree it's like one of those episodes that people don't normally think about, but they should give it another watch.
Yeah, I don't know if it's really worth talking about, but another slight maybe thing against it is people might confuse it with Necessary Evil.
I actually
no. I
this
think
would-
it is worth talking about.
I could actually see this as a good like duology with Necessary Evil.
Oh yeah,
I think you should bring it up. Let's bring it up.
that you were found over the body of Gul Dukat attempting to strangle him.
Well, when we get into the sneaky good, I can bring that up because it's sneaky because you forget this exists.
We have 16 minutes until 10.
Interrogate members of the
This is clip 2, and the rest of the clips are like a quarter of a page. So
We're good.
we're good.
We
We're in a
got
good
half an
place.
hour still.
Yeah.
From our position at the table, it had to have come from quiet down.
Oh, Kurtwood, I love you.
Or a conviction.
He's really fantastic.
I kept wanting him to call someone a dumbass.
It probably won't be a shock, but my quote's coming from RoboCop again tonight.
Oh yeah, can you fly? Is it Can You Fly?
That was one of them, but it's not going to be that one.
Is it Bitches Leave?
No. You have to be careful with his quotes from that movie.
What a good scene. That is one of the great scenes in this episode.
It's great, and I think Rene Aubergenois is at the top of his game in this episode. I want to go back a little bit to talk about the scene with Dax and Dukat, because it's no secret, obviously, by this point, if you've been listening, that Dax is my favorite character. And one of the things I like about her is that she's usually pretty strong-willed in the sense that she doesn't, when she's put into tough situations, she doesn't crack or get scared or get intimidated that often. But she was, in that scene, acting a little intimidated. And I kind of wondered if it was her trying to play her role, or what was going on. And actually,
without a doubt.
No, but actually too, like, Dax got separated from the group before they kind of discovered that this is Odo's memory. So she kind of she may think that they're still in time travel mode, because she was speculating before she got taken away. So if I was thinking, like, how creepy is this? If she thinks that they're in time travel mode, she's trying to not do anything that would disrupt the timeline, which means that actually might be genuine fear, because we all know why Dukat brought her up there. So basically, I hate to put it this way, but like, maybe she's scared that she's going to actually have to let herself be raped.
No, without a doubt in my mind, she is playing scared to get his confidence that he's in control. Big scary Dukat's just got another easy victim. He's alone. Brain him. She is in control of the situation.
I agree. She kind of bounces back once she realizes that he's there just for a friend, quote unquote. But I thought about that other angle, and there's like, you know what? I could actually buy that too, because that would be ultra creepy, knowing that you.
But
you can't really
this is still the same world where Dax was willing to have herself get killed a few times to stand up for whatever kooky honor she has. Even if she went up there thinking she's going to be killed, she's not going to demur and be afraid of him. She's going to spit in his face if she thinks she's about to get killed. She was just role playing as the victim to gain his, let him be overly confident with her, and then she'll just kick his ass.
Either way,
it proven in the next scene with her and him.
Exactly.
No, I agree. I get that, but either way, to me, it works. All those times that she was going to die, it was all her decision. So
the uber feminist in all of Trek.
I really like it. But could you? I was just like, I put myself in that psychological place of knowing that you may have to let this happen in order to like not disrupt the timeline, and that would be creepy.
Yeah, that's not a pleasant concept. But even if Starfleet Temporal Investigation Committee comes in later, I think let them be damned. She was not going to let that happen.
I think too, because she knows Dukat already. She has that insight of, Dukat wants to win her over rather than him force himself on her. So long as she can still play that damsel in distress, slowly gaining trust, she's buying herself time before she has to get to that, because I don't think Dukat wants to win the hearts of people. Yeah. He's not just going to force himself on her, because then, he looks like that villain at that point.
Right. And then it would
wants her to say, yes, I've fallen for you. And I think she knows that and is buying time.
Yeah.
No, I never thought of that. That's good too. Also too, like, offhand sort of thing, but the Resistance member that they meet up with in the Bajoran section, did anyone else think he was the one who set the bomb? Because I did. He sure was in a hurry to get out of there.
I thought that, for sure. But they never really circle back to who it was.
No, we never do find out who it was.
No.
And I don't know that it matters too much.
No, it doesn't. It was just something that I was speculating on.
I think that it's the guy who sat down with them personally. But again, it doesn't really matter because this particular narrative is about what Odo did. And
right.
We don't really get that until the last few minutes. But then when you watch it a second time, maybe a third time, if you're crazy like me, you feel that and you cry because every moment you get Odo's desperation, and you don't necessarily get it the first time. You get a little bit of it.
Well, yeah,
he's
third,
trying. Fourth time you watch this,
he's arguing with himself, which
absolutely.
This is where Chris talks about, like, I argue myself back around in a quarter, or argue myself back to a different point, ask a question, answer it myself. I now like why Dax is involved because, again, you just mentioned it and it just clicked into my head. This is about Odo addressing his issues and his guilt around all that. He knew all these girls were going up there and being raped by Dukat, and that's why there's a rape angle in this story.
And that's why
she is forced into it.
It's super powerful. It makes that point that you just made even more powerful at the end, because what he says is, I don't know, I hope so. And to me, that means he knew a ton more than he's willing to admit to himself.
Right. And that's not the focus of the story. The focus of the story is people being killed. But think of all the other victims he was complacent with.
Yes.
Totally innocent people. And that's not really
him. But he plays it as though it pains him to his deepest core. And that's what's so beautiful about this episode is this episode is about who are your heroes and why are they your heroes. And that messes with me. It completely messes with me in my deepest, innermost parts to think, who are my heroes? Why are they my heroes? I would consider Odo at this point, 4 seasons in, he's a hero. Like he's a good guy. I believe in him. I think he's great. And this episode breaks my heart, makes me feel something. And that to me is what TV is for. That to me is what watching these episodes are for. To ask those questions and then to make you feel something about those questions. This does it.
Plus, also, it's a good exercise for, like, why Odo is so meticulous now. I mean, because that's part of his character. He's meticulous to a fault. And I like how this episode addresses, like, the one time that he cut corners, it cost 4 innocent lives.
You say one time.
Well, I mean,
sure that he agrees. That
no. You're absolutely right. But like, we get to see this one instance where he did cut corners.
Right.
Yeah.
And from what we've been reminded of in this episode and shown so much times, the Cardassian justice system pretty much guarantees that this was not the only time, and he knows that.
Yeah, which is what makes his admission at the end super powerful. Which we'll get there.
Right,
yeah, we'll get there.
But let's get there. So I'm gonna just crack one as we move into the next one. Jadzia and Dukat are conversing about the Bajorans. Dukat sees them as his children, and even though they try to kill him, he sees it as his own fault. He thinks of himself as generous, and his pompous ass gets knocked out for his ego. Dax then hits up the computer and finds out where his personal starship is.
Great one-liner by Dax, by the way. He says something about like his compassion's so big and she knocks, and so is your ego.
Boom, and so is your ego. It's amazing. Anyway, Cisco recognizes that Thrax is different. He doesn't have the casual brutality of a Cardassian. Cisco also brings up that Thrax wasn't actually on the station at this particular point in time. He wonders if Odo knows more than he thinks he does. Odo admits nothing. But the conversation is cut short when Dax makes an explosive entrance to break her boys out. Boom! Let's go, fellas. They're heading for Dukat's personal shuttle when Thrax overtakes them. They fight, And then they realize he's a changeling as he seeps up into the header. The crew thinks they made it, and they walk right into a trap. As we go into clip number 3, Odo and Thrax, part 2. You're welcome, man.
We're gonna have to cut out all those fucks
I'm
from this
listening, but I
episode.
don't have much time.
Well, you know,
Make a very serious
that wouldn't have made me
mistake.
say fuck.
Oh, I don't know. I was doing some live bleeping. I think that would cover it all up right there.
Hey, Droid, you'll find a similarity to 4 incidents in Musilla province, none of which we could have done.
This proves nothing. And under Cardassian law, the accused must prove his innocence. Since the evidence in this case is
What are we doing after this clip?
the investigation is over.
Your job is to
You guys want me
find,
to keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay.
obtain convictions.
Let me have like one comment about Kurtwood since we didn't mention him yet, and then
All right,
we'll
Blair.
move on.
Blair, you want to comment too?
Is that none of you would be accused.
I'll just listen to your guys and maybe throw in a comment onto.
Okay.
Yeah, please feel free to talk, Blair. I feel like we've stepped all over you this week.
The occupation has
No, I'm good.
We're moving fast this week. So
Yeah.
My
We're in
fault.
express
Matt, I was
mode.
late.
I'll try not to have this happen again. This was the only time that worked for them.
Well, I fully apologize. I knew that you needed out, and I was at my mom's. And
Political ramifications of the resistance. It's all part of the same problem.
when your people resort to terrorism and violence, they're fighting against order, against stability, against the rule of law, and this must be stopped. There is more to life.
We should talk about this too, because what I like about the Thrax thing is that all of his dialogue, they did a really good job writing his dialogue because it all sounds like something what Odo would say.
exactly. And
Let's
the guy delivers it such a good way.
let me mention Kirkwood, and then we can go into that for a moment. Then
But we are not terrorists. We're not even Bajorans. There's been a temporal displacement of some kind. We don't belong in this time. We're from the future. I know. You know. Then what are you going to do about it?
What I am supposed to do. Nothing more, nothing less. The question is, what are you going to do, Odo?
So this is the moment. This is the moment where Odo is faced with his own choices, with his own ideals, with his own life. And it's terrifying.
And I just want to point out that we haven't mentioned it yet. Matt, you mentioned Rene Auberjonois is at the top of his game, and what better way to give him a good foil to talk with and to work through this than our guest star this week, Kurtwood Smith. He is, if you want intense menace, just interesting character with a minimum amount of dialogue, just come in and have a presence already there just to work with. That this is one of those character actors that you go to and just instantly, okay, there's a lot of weight to this guy and instant credibility before he even opens his mouth. And then when he does, it's only even a little bit better.
Absolutely. And of course, Star Trek fans will know him as the Federation president from Star Trek VI. And of course, he's the main bad guy in Year of Hell, which is, widely considered one of the better Voyager episodes. The thing that I like about Thrax, and it's something that I was noticing as I was watching the episode, and especially listening to the clip, is that all of his lines of dialogue, which are delivered so well, by the way, but all of his lines of dialogue, the writers did a really good job of writing his lines as believable of coming out of Odo's mouth, because that's the big reveal, is that wherever Thrax is, that's actually supposed to be Odo.
Yep.
And so all of his lines sound like they would come from Odo, and that's important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that Cisco kind of says it earlier. I mentioned it in a line that I wrote, that that this guy doesn't seem to be as brutal. And he can't understand it. At that point, he doesn't know. He's flabbergasted as to why this is a Cardassian, and we're supposed to be 9 years in if this guy's actually here, but we're actually 7 years in. None of it really makes sense for a while. And I think it's like a 10 or 15 minute time period in the episode where you're just left to wonder. And part of that builds the suspense. You're sitting and you're watching, if you're watching for the first time, or even if you're watching for the third time, and you're feeling this pit in the middle of your stomach because Odo knows more than he's admitting, but also he's not admitting it. And everybody in the episode is play acting their parts. And it's painful and it hurts. And I feel like that makes it powerful.
And he constantly, he sees all those specters of the actual people that pop up every now and then.
Yes.
And it's really creepy too that, like, I think it's at the bar shot where they walk by, they all have like the burn marks in their chest from where they're going to get shot.
Well, that one guy has the fist mark in the middle of his chest the entire time. Every time you see him, he has the fist mark in the middle of his chest, and it's painful. It hurts. It physically hurts when you see the end and you see that Odo allowed it to happen, and you see him watch on with seemingly this uncaring gleam, which we haven't quite gotten to.
No, but we're about to. We should get there because, not only does Odo have they all been play acting the roles, but, final insult to injury at the very end here, he has to, they bring him out, they bring all of them out of the roles, and they get to watch what actually happened.
So Odo finds himself on the promenade. His friends are about to be executed, and he finally takes action, and he admits the truth. The scene shifts, and our crew are back to their normal looks. And in a bone-chilling climax, we watch the three men who have been haunting Odo be gunned down at his own order, as Odo watches on himself now, in the moment, in horror and regret. He delivers an impassioned monologue outlining his own regrets, and at the end of it all, they all wake up.
Real quick, kudos to the show for actually showing them get killed.
Oh, I think that's a powerful scene.
Yeah, that's important. That's easy. One of those things where they just edit around it and it's implied. No, you need to kind of see that in this episode.
Right. And I mean, and it's not like we haven't seen people get shot by phasers in any Star Trek before, but there's something creepy about this one.
Well, we talk about stakes a lot. On this show. I feel like this is the stakes of this episode. If nobody actually was shot, if Odo's people weren't actually shot in the chest, this wouldn't be as powerful an episode as it is.
No, you're right. I'm just talking about the fact that, like, we've seen people get shot all the time by phasers before, but this one is just, it feels different. It feels ugly. I mean, it's almost like we're watching a public beheading.
Right. I mean, it's all the, I don't know if there are formal rules or whatnot, but when you have an older fashioned movie, you would see somebody shoot the gun. There'd be an edit of somebody being hit. And that edit is a detachment, and it's not as visceral as when you see it in some modern movies. It's always much more graphic and impactful with the same amount of blood, the same amount of special effects when you see the gun and the person being shot in the same image. It is much more gut-wrenching. And that's exactly what they showed here. And you don't see that every day in a Star Trek episode. You don't see that too often in a lot of TV. And that's one way to make it dang effective.
Yeah.
The one thing I noticed in this scene, and maybe it was just the way I was seeing it, and you guys can comment on it, it almost seemed when Odo was looking at himself, the Odo in the past seemed almost defiant, almost very Cardassian, like, yeah, these guys deserved it. Yet he would have known back then. You almost think maybe it would have been more effective had both Odos kind of looked at each other and kind of with the guilty look, or at least the old Odo. But I just didn't get that impression. He just seemed like very efficient, cold-hearted, and
He's also our Pinocchio character for this version of Star Trek, and he's only very recently starting to become human in his emotions. And this is him way further back where he would be even much more cold. So yeah, he's probably only now really truly discovering that guilt that he should have been feeling back then.
Yeah.
I mean, not only is he
genuflects at the end of this episode that it was not until he was in the Great Link that he even realized how terrible the situation was.
Right.
Okay. That's
Right.
a good point.
I think
also
that's a fair point.
And also, too, to Matt's point, not only, he was cold and everything like that, by a bunch of people, Cardassians, who are reinforcing him to be that way because they like that. That's good for them.
Oh yeah, they love the cold justice of it all. Let's power through to the very end here. So Odo finds himself on the promenade, and as his friends are about to be executed, he finally takes action and admits the truth. The scene shifts, and our crew are back to their normal looks. And in a bone-chilling climax, we watch the three men who have been haunting him be gunned down by his own order. As Odo watches on in horror and regret, he delivers an impassioned monologue outlining his own regrets. And at the end of it, all of them wake up. And Julian is pretty sure that they were all in a weird vision of the Great Link.
Boo.
Apparently, F you. This is a great ending. Apparently, Odo is more changeling than he actually thought. So Julian leaves, and Kira comes in what will be our final.
And perhaps the best scene of the episode.
Absolutely the best scene of the episode.
When I first read your report, I didn't know what to think. So I said to myself, it's all right, Nerys, you're stunned. You need to let it sink in a little. But it's been 2 days, Odo. I still don't know what to think.
I'm guilty. What more is there to say?
Maybe nothing. Maybe a lot. I believed in you. A lot of people did. You were special. You were the one man who stood apart from everyone else. The one man who stood for justice. Now what?
Now I'm just another imperfect solid.
Okay. The prophets know I'm not perfect. I guess the truth is that anyone who lived through the occupation had to get a little dirty. But I need to know that no other innocent people died on your watch, Odo. That this was the only time.
I'm not sure. I hope so.
Man, that's a rough question for Kira to ask because she knows there's no easy answer to that, and he can't really answer it. Ooh, that's a low blow question from her.
But God doesn't make a perfect outro for the episode.
Oh yeah, of course it does. I mean, a little behind the scenes thing. We listened to these clips live. Every other one we goofed off and talked through. This one we didn't. We listened to this one. The best part of the episode. It's that classic Deep Space Nine
ending.
Ugly, gray, nobody's totally satisfied ending.
And is there such a thing as a perfect hero?
Clearly, you're to think not from this episode.
And I think that's a realistic thing. There are no real heroes. Like we look at World War II, and we want to think that the greatest generation were these amazing heroes, but they were mostly racist, awful. Like if we look at them from the lens of today, they were homosexual hating, African American hating, a-holes, but they saved the world from a much more terrifying end. And
I don't
so,
think this is saying that there are no heroes. I think that this is saying there are no perfect heroes. We elevate them to this
exactly.
perfect status.
Every hero has some flaw. Every single one. But I feel like that's kind of a thing that's been coming all the way back from Greek history. Hercules, every hero has flaws. You know, Odysseus, every hero has flaws. You know, you look at all these old stories from then to now, and every hero has flaws. Beowulf, every hero has flaws. And you see it just ringing loud and proud. Every hero has flaws. But somehow this episode makes it palpable and powerful, and it's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, let's move into final thoughts and ratings. And if no one has any objections, I'd like to go for this first this week, because this is an episode that's, you know, it's an odd episode to say it's near and dear to my heart, but what I'm trying to say is that I feel like a lot of people would forget this episode because it happens right before a lot of the important stuff is going to happen, because just a couple of weeks, we're going to get at the start of like what's going to evolve into the Dominion War. A lot of stuff is going to happen in these next few weeks that this episode can get lost in the shuffle, but this is a really powerful episode. It's one of my favorites, and actually we were discussing behind the scenes on this, but it actually would make a great duology with that episode from season 2, Necessary Evil, the noir episode, where, you know, we have a scene very much like we had at the end of this episode with the roles reversed. There it was Kira who was in the wrong, and Odo was confronting her about it. So it's just a wonderful, very heavy, but very, very powerful episode that I always hold up as a like the perfect example of Matt's sneakily great episodes. So for me, I know it's not perfect, and I know no one will probably give it the same score than I do, but for me, this is an episode that really affected me when I first saw it. So I'm going to go ahead and give it my 5 stars, because I'm trying to reserve that for things that really impacted me when I first saw it, and this was certainly one of them. This is one of my favorite episodes of this season, I think. So, Blair, why don't you go next?
Well, for me, this episode, I think, you know, listening to everyone's comments tonight, and I think we generated a lot of great discussion in a short period of time. But for me, this, again, was one of those episodes that I came in with a score, and I think I'm going to give it higher score after listening to the conversation. We mentioned the fact that this is an episode that sometimes gets forgotten. And I think for me, I remembered it, but I didn't remember how good it was. And I think it gets better each time you see it, because you see a little bit more of something perhaps that you missed the time before. And I really liked it. I liked the fact that, you know, we discussed the Thrax character was really good. We discussed the pairings of, well, not the pairings, but the group that was involved in this particular storyline, I think was well matched this week. You know, as much as, you know, we said, you know, does Dax really fit in? Is it kind of a filler? I still think even that had some good moments, because again, we get to see Ducat and his arrogance. So I again came in with a certain score, but I think I'm going to raise my score. And I agree, it's not a perfect score. And I must admit, sometimes I get the two stories confused, what really happened in Necessary Evil versus, you know, this episode. And, so, you know, so there is again, it would have been great had they really linked the two together a little more. But I would like to rank this, I'll give it 4.25 assassination attempts.
Chris?
All right. So there are, in Star Trek fandom, very few episodes that viscerally kind of spike you at your core and really give you the chills and make you feel something. There are a couple episodes early on in DS9 and then later on in DS9, but this is a very powerful episode. And for me personally, it makes me consider the ideas of legacy, legend. What do you consider the desolation and desperation of those trapped in wartime situations? Where do you sit on those subjects? And this one deepens and broadens at least two characters in the entire context of Deep Space Nine, which is a ton more. Maybe even the antithesis of what we saw last episode. This builds a flourishing and enticing picture, even in a bleak but harrowing timeline. And so this episode particularly hits all my buttons. It's fantastic. I can't give it anything less than 5 out of 5. Unutterably and unfathomably absurdist unctions of untimely usurpations of a life unfortunately unabsolved and illuminated. This is 5 stars for me.
God, that was really powerful and articulate. Thanks, Chris. Matt, wrap us up.
To wrap up, I know a lot of people will rate things, and I think we might see it a little bit from Chris's point there. Thematically, that will be their main thrust of how they'll review something. And there is no denying the themes and the questions that this episode raises. It's just the aces. It's great. I'll just argue that the execution just wasn't quite as good as you would kind of hope. And this is the only reason it will drop down, is that I think it's very early telegraphed that this is in Odo's head, very early, and that we have to watch probably too much of the episode of him coming to that conclusion. You could explain that as potentially this is still him being in denial, but the net result is that it undercuts a little bit of the tension in the episode. So the questions it's raising are perfect, but the way that they decided to really put it on the screen just kind of took out a little bit of the tension that you could also have from it. So if they just rework that a little bit, this goes from that 4 to 5. But yeah, this certainly qualifies as a sneaky good episode, kind of unfairly conflated perhaps with Necessary Evil, but this is one that completely stands on its own right. It's still an excellent episode. 4 stars.
Yeah, I think we were all really surprised this week, and that's a great thing. We are in a bit of a time crunch this week, so we're going to save feedback again. We will get to it.
Let's just do feedback. Hanson, I know you got to roll. Hanson, good night. We love you.
But he has to end the call.
Oh, no, because I didn't start the call.
No, but you know what? We can leave a blank space in here, and I'll start wrapping up everything. And you, Chris, if you host another call and do feedback, just give it to me, and I'll splice them together.
Let's do that.
Well, Blair is out. My kid's about to wake up. Right, Blair, you're not going to do a feedback?
Yeah, I got to get moving. It's been a long day, so.
That's fair.
Well, if you want to do your own call and just hammer through 10 episodes that were behind, Chris, feel free.
I mean, I could do Zubair's one feedback.
We had like 2 message board things from 2. So
I could do all that. Yeah.
If you want, go for it. Hey,
all right.
knock yourself out.
Feedback blank.
Well, Matt needs to re-edit the or give a lead in a little bit better, right?
I know. That's what I'm saying. So Matt's gonna end the episode. We're gonna leave a feedback blank right here. I'll record a feedback.
All right, well, the transition
episode.
The transition will be fine. Chris, just make sure at the beginning of your call or your recording that you say something like, "And now we're gonna turn to our feedback on whatever episode it is."
Got it.
Okay. So thank you so much for writing in with your feedback. We always love hearing from you, and there are a number of different ways to get a hold of us. You can email us at up2podcast@gmail.com, leave a comment on our forums at forum.checkmatefamily.com, follow us on Twitter at up2podcast, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/upperpylon2. And while you're on iTunes, please give us a 5-star review. It really does get the word out there about the show, and we truly appreciate it, and we will read it on air. You can also find us personally on Twitter I am at mhansen0207, HANSEN, talking all things Star Trek, all things Marvel Cinematic Universe, and all things nerdy.
I can be found at ProSub0, where I'm usually tweeting about the weird, bad HBO movies I'm watching late at night up with my baby. Pretty much my 5th or 6th or 8th or 10th reviewing of The Accountant. Not so good. Not so bad.
And I can be found at Medic1849, where I'm probably either retweeting or liking certain science fiction stuff or hockey posts.
And I'm at Carnivore J, where I'll probably exclusively be doing a Golden Girls Respawn.
Love it. So thank you so much for joining us this week. This was a heavy episode, but an interesting one to talk about. Next week, we segue back into comedy as we watch Quark and Odo go on an epic journey up a mountain in The Ascent.
This is Blair from Ontario, Canada. Until next time.
No one really knows why they are alive until they know what they die for. This is Chris in Desperation, USA.
Hey, Dickie boy, how's tricks? I'm Matt in Buffalo.
And this is Matt from Arizona. Closing hailing frequencies, docking clamps are open, and you are cleared for departure.